Tearful mourners gathered today to bid farewell to the victims of the recent shocking car accident that took the lives of 9 people. A large crowd of patients poured out on the street today, demanding doctors end their prolonged walkout. With the KBO League looking to see a record-high number of stadium goers this season, we take a look at its changing fan base. It's July 4th, 2024. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. It's been 3 days since the deadly car accident in downtown Seoul that took the lives of 9 people. This morning, families and friends of the victims bid farewell to their loved ones. The police began their first questioning of the driver involved in the deadly accident. Bae Yoon-ji begins our coverage.
Mourners gathered at a funeral home in central Seoul on Thursday to bid farewell to their loved ones who lost their lives in Monday's fatal car accident. A woman who lost her 54-year-old son tearfully called out his name as the funeral car headed to the burial site. Among the victims were 4 people who worked at a bank near Seoul City Hall. More than 100 of their co-workers lined up outside the funeral home as they mourned the loss of their colleagues. Wearing black, some were seen wiping away tears. The victims also included 2 Seoul City government officials who worked at City Hall. 2 funeral cars carrying them stopped by Seoul City Hall and circled the building before heading to the burial site. The deadly car accident took place on Monday evening when a Hyundai Genesis sedan hit pedestrians waiting at a traffic light near Seoul City Hall. The driver, in his late 60s, has been claiming that his car suddenly accelerated out of control and the brakes did not work. Some initial findings, however, contradict his claims. The police suspect the driver stepped on the accelerator shortly before the accident, as they discovered that the extra brake line was not on, and because they did not find any skid marks at the scene. On Thursday afternoon, the police began conducting their first questioning of the driver. They're expected to ask him in detail about the circumstances of the accident, including his claims of unintended acceleration and why he was going in the wrong direction on a one-way street. Bae Yoon-ji, Arirang News.
Amid the prolonged doctors' walkout, senior doctors at Asan Medical Center began reducing patient care starting today. Patients held a mass rally in central Seoul on the same day, calling for doctors to end their walkout. Cha Yoon-kyung has more.
At an emergency committee meeting of professors of medicine at the University of Ulsan, affiliated with the Asan Medical Center, they said that they will take intensive measures to ensure that there is no disruption in the treatment of critical illnesses and emergency care, but begin reducing non-essential treatments and surgeries instead of going on a full-scale strike. On the first day of readjusted medical treatment, the emergency committee predicted that major surgical operations would drop by 29% compared to last week. Hospital management expects there will be no massive disruption since there are about 10,000 outpatient appointments as usual. In response, a group of 92 patient organizations staged a rally in central Seoul on Thursday, calling for doctors to end their ongoing walkout that has disrupted public health services and caused fear among patients. On the same day, Lee Sang-min, the Minister of Interior and Safety, vowed measures to minimize any negative impacts on returning trainee doctors, reiterating that the government will support them. Minister Lee once again explained the necessity of medical reform and urged trainee doctors to return to work. Lee also asked the residents to engage in dialogue to actively explain their demands. The government will announce measures for trainee doctors who have not returned to work in the near future. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Rival lawmakers at the National Assembly are engaging in a fierce standoff following a day-long filibuster that was launched on Wednesday afternoon. The biggest clash of the 22nd National Assembly thus far revolves around an opposition-led bill calling for a special investigation into the death of a Marine during a search and rescue operation amid last year's floods. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo explains.
When National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik declared an end to a filibuster on the contentious special investigation bill on Thursday, announcing he would call a vote.
We'll begin voting immediately, following explanations of the process.
Ruling party lawmakers who had requested the prolonged debate surrounded the podium, shouting and shaking their fists in anger. As of 5:30 p.m., the rival lawmakers remained in a stalemate over the vote. This is after an over 24-hour filibuster that was launched on Wednesday afternoon regarding the bill calling for a special prosecution probe into the death of a Marine during last year's flood rescue operations and alleged government interference with a preliminary investigation into the case. The ruling party, which had called for the relay debate, asserted the bill was politically motivated and targeted President Yoon Suk-yeol. The opposition reiterated the need for a special investigation, bringing up allegations that the government and military officials interfered with the initial internal investigation by the military. But the legislative history goes back beyond just the night. The bill was first introduced during the previous 21st National Assembly, then two by opposition lawmakers who unilaterally passed it in early May. Later that month, President Yoon Suk-yeol vetoed the bill. The bill returned to the Assembly for a revote, but it failed to pass at the very last plenary session of the 21st Assembly. The main opposition Democratic Party reintroduced the bill as its first legislative goal when the 22nd National Assembly commenced at the end of May. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The nation's finance chief says Korea will seek a proactive approach against external risk factors to maintain its export-oriented recovery momentum for the rest of the year. Lee Soo-jin with the details.
The South Korean government is carrying out measures to maintain export competitiveness in the face of global uncertainties. Measures including expanding trade networks, increasing overseas projects and support funds, and following up with state visits were announced during a ministerial meeting on Thursday presided over by Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok. While the economy is showing signs of recovery, with the economic growth projection for this year being revised upwards to 2.6% on the back of strong exports, the minister stressed that external uncertainties remain for the latter half of the year.
Geopolitical tensions remain and global supply chains are being reorganized as major countries prioritize their own interests. The government will thus carefully monitor external uncertainty factors and supply chain risk, while concentrating policy efforts to further strengthen exports for the second half of the year.
Since 2004, South Korea has secured 21 FTAs with 59 countries, behind only Singapore for the number of FTAs, and it plans to continue expanding its trade network by forming relationships with emerging markets such as the Global South as well as key Indo-Pacific nations. As for strategies to win overseas projects, the government plans to strengthen cooperation between governments to further secure large-scale projects. And the Export-Import Bank of Korea, the nation's official export credit agency, will spend 85 trillion won, or around $61.5 billion, over the next 5 years to help companies to win orders in key strategic areas such as infrastructure and power plants. The government will also carry out follow-up measures to state visits, including the most recent to 3 Central Asian countries, by boosting cooperation with them in key areas such as key minerals, energy, and infrastructure. The finance minister added that this is the best time to carry out preemptive measures to combat external uncertainties as exports are showing a robust recovery, and that the government will continue working towards making sure that these measures will lead to boosting domestic demand as well. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
As the country's new first Vice Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, President Yoon Suk-yeol has named Yong Ho-sung the ministry's current Chief of International Cultural Affairs and Public Relations Office. The announcement came on Thursday, saying Yoon, who's worked at the ministry for the past 30 years, has extensive practical experience and a strong theoretical foundation in cultural and artistic policy, which falls under his new jurisdiction. Yoon also has a PhD in performing arts management from Kyunghee University. The KBO League is looking to see a record high number of stadium goers this season, and its fans are getting younger. Our An Sung-jin was there to find out why.
Screams and shouts echo around the stadium. Any South Korean ballpark will make you want to get up on your feet to join the cheering crowd. Baseball has been known as having a relatively older fan base, with the average fan being in their 50s. But over the past few years, a particular trend stands out. It's the increasing number of younger fans and female fans that come to watch the game.
I think I come here to enjoy the delicious food and cheer with other people. The cheering culture is well developed, so you get to have fun with your friends.
I think people are interested because the cheering culture is so well developed.
I would agree on the cheering culture, but also new TV shows on baseball are trending these days, so I think that also boosts the popularity.
The KBO Korean Baseball League looks set to see a record-high 10 million stadium goers by the end of the season. And according to a major ticket office for the league, 4 out of 10 audience members are in their 20s, which is nearly double what it was in 2019. And more than half of the audience is female. Then what attracts this younger age group? An official says there's more to Korean baseball than its outstanding cheering culture.
As we work with more OTT services such as YouTube as well as Instagram, fans get to enjoy more of our content. There are also many content creators that the Korean Baseball League has to compete with, so we plan to develop more sports content that captures not only young fans but other age groups too.
With the vibrant cheering culture attracting more and more fans, an afternoon at the ballpark looks to be one of the hottest tickets in town. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Koreans living overseas will have easier access to online services thanks to a new identity verification system. The mobile Overseas Korean Identity Verification Card is being piloted in selected areas and will be expanded to all overseas embassies. Our Shin Ha-young tells us more.
In South Korea, accessing online services such as printing certain documents or accessing online banking often requires verifying your identity, which involves entering a verification code sent via text message. This code confirms your identity based on the name and personal information that's registered with your domestic telecom provider. But sometimes it's not that easy. People living abroad have had trouble with the identity verification process when using South Korean online services because they don't have a South Korean mobile number. To address this issue, in collaboration with the Presidential Committee on the Digital Platform Government and the Overseas Koreans Agency, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety on Wednesday launched what's called the Mobile Overseas Korean Identity Verification Card Service.
The government will build a digital platform to make it easier for everyone to use administrative services. We will work to ensure that the advancements in digital technology are not a barrier for anyone.
Overseas Koreans have welcomed the new service as it now gives them to access domestic online administrative services. However, with concerns over limited service availability, the government has pledged to expand the usage.
After setting up a stable system and amending related laws, we'll make the mobile ID cards available for domestic mobile banking services. We'll also enable its use for identity verification instead of using passports at diplomatic offices.
Having to visit diplomatic offices for the initial issuance of the mobile ID cards was seen as an inconvenience.
In the United States, not all states have those offices, so residents may need to travel to another state, which can be inconvenient.
Right, so we're looking into ways to streamline this process. We're also working on enabling overseas residents to obtain online certificates to give them access to South Korean online services using their e-passports.
Starting Wednesday, the service is being piloted at 7 locations, including the Korean embassies in China, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Consulate General in Los Angeles. The service will be available at all diplomatic offices abroad by the end of this year. 신하영, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, violent confrontations between Israel and Hezbollah continue, with the latter launching some 100 rockets into Israeli territory following the death of a commander. Yoon has more.
Hezbollah says it fired 100 rockets at Israel in response to the killing of one of its senior commanders. The Lebanese militant group said through a statement on Wednesday that Mohammed Nima Nasser had been killed in an Israeli strike in southern Lebanon, later adding that it launched 100 Katyusha rockets at an Israeli military base and another attack near the border. According to the Israeli military, most of the rockets fell in open areas without causing any injuries. Israel identified Nasser as the commander of a unit that operated from southwestern Lebanon, which was responsible for firing attacks into Israel. Sources indicate that Nasser held a similar rank to Taleb Abdallah, a senior commander killed by an Israeli strike in June. That attack prompted Hezbollah to launch some 200 rockets at Israel, the largest rocket attack since the conflict in Gaza began on October 7th. Another of Hezbollah's top commanders was killed by Israel in January. Also on Wednesday, the Israeli government said it is reviewing Hamas's response to an Israeli proposal, which included the release of hostages and a ceasefire. Israel's intelligence service confirmed on Wednesday that mediators in Qatar and Egypt had submitted Hamas's response to Israel. Hamas also confirmed that one of the group's leaders had engaged with mediators positively, but demanded a deal that includes a complete ceasefire. Yoon, Arirang News.
In the UK, voters there are heading to polling stations on Thursday to cast their ballots in a general election that many pundits believe is a referendum on 14 years of the Conservative Party's governance. Choi Soo-young has this report.
The United Kingdom is preparing for Thursday's general election. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of the Conservative Party and opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer are making their final push for votes.
I understand people's frustrations with me, with our party, but I say this, it's a choice about the future of our country, a choice that is going to have severe consequences for each and every family if we get that choice wrong. Just think what a Labour government with a supermajority would do.
We've now had 14 years of chaos, of division and failure, and the choice tomorrow is to bring that to an end, to turn the page and start to rebuild with Labour.
The upcoming general election will determine the composition of the House of Commons and ultimately the next Prime Minister. The Labour Party is forecast to win by a landslide, ending the Conservative Party's 14-year rule. Recent polls show that Labour has about 40% support and the Conservatives have 20%. On Wednesday evening, YouGov, a public opinion and data company based in London, forecast that Labour could win 431 out of 650 seats in the House of Commons. If this happens, it will be the largest number of seats won by a single party since the first UK general election in 1832. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has appealed to his supporters with strong controls on refugees, such as sending asylum seekers to Rwanda and an increase in defence spending. Labour leader Keir Starmer has focused on a century strategy promising stable economic growth, wealth creation and unwavering national security. Many voters blame the 14 years of the Conservative-led governments for the cost of living crisis, issues in the healthcare system and the chaos due to Brexit. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news, the worldwide global warming phenomenon is also taking a toll here in the country, where the average temperatures hit a record high for the month of June. According to a climate analysis released by the Korea Meteorological Administration on Thursday, last month's nationwide average temperatures was 22.7 degrees Celsius, ranking it the highest average for June since 1973. Although the same temperatures was recorded in June 2020, additional climate data put last month in the top spot on record. Seoul also experienced its first tropical night of the summer on June 21st, the earliest in 118 years, according to the KMA.
Starting with the Seoul metropolitan area on the way home from work, the rainy season is expected to spread across the country again tonight and continue until tomorrow afternoon. It looks like a lot of rain will fall by tomorrow. As for the amount of rain, up to 150 millimeters in the Chungcheongdo provinces and Jeollabuk-do province, and up to 80 millimeters in other areas including Seoul. As much as 100 millimeters is expected in southern Gyeonggi-do province. This rain will mostly stop tomorrow afternoon, but it will continue until night in northeastern Gyeonggi-do province and Gangwon-do province. Tomorrow, Seoul and Busan will start off at 23 degrees Celsius. Highs will be topping out at 29 in Seoul, Daegu, Gyeongju, and Jeju, 33 degrees Celsius. On the weekend, there will be strong rain all over the country again. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Thanks for joining us. You've tuned into Arirang's Within the Frame. I'm Han-dan in Seoul. A wave of important economic headlines rolled in this week as we kick off the second half of this year. The South Korean government unveiled key economic policy measures for the latter half, prioritizing price stabilization and reducing the cost of living for ordinary citizens, while the U.S. Federal Reserve released key clues as to where inflation is headed and when interest rate cuts may begin. That's as South Korea implemented major changes in the foreign exchange market to attract more foreign capital and enhance the competitiveness of the local currency. For expert analysis on these developments and the market outlook for the next 6 months of 2024, we turn to Kim Se-wan, a professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. It's always great to see you.
Thank you for having me today.
Also with us tonight is Trinh Nguyen, senior economist at Natixis. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me today.
All right, Trinh, let's start off with you. The FOMC minutes were unveiled on Wednesday, while Fed Chair Jerome Powell made some important remarks during his closely watched speech at a central banking forum in Portugal. What are the key takeaways from them?
The key takeaway is that we have inflation slowing, which is a great sign, but we're still nowhere near the 2% target. So we would need more consistent data to show that inflation is moving closer to the 2% target. Obviously, the Fed doesn't even think that, based on the SEP, that it will reach this target until end of 2026. We think they'll get there around end of 2025. And I think most importantly, we'll also need to see significant softening of the labor market. The strength of the labor market is a concern, meaning that we need demand to also soften to make sure that inflation is decelerating and that monetary conditions, which real rates are very tight, are tight enough to cool domestic demand in the U.S. In other words, things are going in the right direction, but not yet enough for a rate cut. And so we have to wait for now. And we don't have conditions just yet for it. And we're unlikely to get it by July.
So quite a bit of progress on inflation, but not quite there yet to start cutting rates. And we're cautiously expecting a possible rate cut in September, according to markets, and we'll be sure to keep close tabs, not only on prices, but also on job figures, as you pointed out. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, South Korea's consumer prices remained in the 2% range for the third straight month in June. In fact, last month's 2.4% rise marked the smallest increase in 11 months. In your view, are conditions ripe for a rate cut in Korea?
Well, the inflation in Korea is stabilized at 2% level from March of this year. So thanks to this lower inflation, it is true that the possibility of Bank of Korea's interest rate cut became higher than before. But U.S. dollars gets stronger these days with higher $1 exchange rates. It means that if Bank of Korea cuts its rate before U.S. Federal Reserve does, $1 exchange rate will be higher and more volatile, which is additional burden to domestic price level by raising import prices. So for stabilizing foreign exchange market, it would be difficult for Bank of Korea to cut base interest rate only.
So we're starting to see inflation cool, and the government also expects prices to drop further in the latter half, but we're not completely out of the woods yet, with the monsoon rain also expected to push up the prices of fresh produce. And also, as you mentioned, the $1, there's also the $1 volatility risk. And just like the U.S. Fed, it looks like the Bank of Korea still needs more conviction to start cutting rates. And staying with you, Dr. Kim, the government has announced some major changes in the foreign exchange market, which has stayed the same since the 1998 financial crisis. These include pushing back FX market closing time for $1 exchanges from 3:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. the next day. What significance does this hold, and how did it play out in the first few days?
Basically, by extending trading hours in foreign exchange market, Korean government aims to enhance the convenience for investors in currency exchange market and reduce transaction cost. Foreign exchange investors can now buy and sell foreign currencies at real-time exchange rates until 2 a.m. And foreign financial institutions that have received government approval can directly trade foreign currencies in the domestic market. This will significantly increase access to foreign exchange market. As a result, there is a growing anticipation for Korea's inclusion in the World Government Bond Index, which is WGBI, and that could attract more funds to domestic capital market. After extension of trading time, there are no abnormal signs in Korean foreign exchange market so far.
And in related question, Trin, how much would South Korea's significant extension of foreign exchange trading hours from 6.5 hours to 17 hours help in attracting more foreign capital and also in elevating the Korean won's position in global financial indexes?
Well, Korea and India, the two major countries, are not yet included, right? So its time is ripe to be included. Moreover, it's seriously considering it. It's been on the watch list since 2022 September, and it's been very, very serious about taking steps to address it so that it can be included at the upcoming September meeting. So I think the odds are quite high. I think investors have positioned for it if you look at bond flows, and it certainly will help. I think being included in the bond index is going to be much easier than the equity index, which wants to be lifted for DM. Now, I think the significance is that with the passive flows, it will free up space for Korea, given that it will be funded by foreign investors. And the second thing is that it will offset some of the outward FDI flows that Korea is doing to make sure that it's competitive. Firms such as Samsung Electronics and etc. have deployed capital, Hyundai, autos, and so on and so forth in the U.S. That's led to capital outflow, right? While that means that it's going to be able to compete better than China and the U.S. thanks to preferential, but it has led to a significant deterioration of the Korean won. And the second thing is that the current account is in surplus, but not always, right? So therefore, positive portfolio inflows is quite positive for the Korean won.
Well, the Korean government believes the extension of the trading hours is an important step in advancing Korea's FX market closer toward global standard. There are fears that it may raise FX market volatility, but hopefully it'll serve its purpose and yield some positive results. Dr. Kim, the Yoon administration has announced key economic policy measures for the latter half of 2024. And these include injecting 5.6 trillion won, or roughly $4.5 billion, to stabilize prices and help reduce the cost of living for ordinary citizens. It also plans to minimize public utility fee hikes. Walk us through the key points of the second half economic policies and also your thoughts.
As we talked about, Korean inflation is pretty much stabilized at low 2% level as of now. But general citizens do not feel this because prices of agricultural products like fruits are still rising in a larger scale. So government will allocate 5.6 trillion won to manage inflation and reduce living costs in the second half of this year. Additionally, they plan to minimize public utility fee increases in gas and electric power. Also, to support revitalization of construction investment, the scale of public investment and private sector projects will be expanded by 15 trillion won. In more details, zero tariffs will be applied to 51 agricultural products and food ingredients. And the interest rate for student loans for the second semester will be frozen at 1.7%, and the support for income contingent repayment student loans, as well as the eligibility and duration for interest exemptions, will be expanded. So basically, Yoon's government is trying to save low-income people's economic pain over the recession of the economy.
The government also raised this year's economic growth forecast to 2.6%, citing stronger than expected export recovery. But average citizens are yet to feel that the economy is getting better in real life, especially the most vulnerable groups, as you mentioned. So we can see that the policy measures are focused on reducing the financial burden on citizens and struggling small business owners as well. Now, moving on to stock markets, Professor Kim, the earnings season will kick off this week, with Samsung Electronics set to announce its preliminary second quarter performance tomorrow. Would Korea's benchmark Kospi rise back up to the 2,800 level? And what's your overall outlook for local stock markets in the second half of this year?
Well, first of all, I have to say that it is very difficult, actually almost impossible, to forecast future stock prices based on economic model. So there could be lots of errors in my saying today. Domestic market is waiting for Samsung Electronics second quarter performance announcement tomorrow because it is the largest cap stock in Korean market. And market expectations for Samsung Electronics performance in the second quarter are very much optimistic. Analysts predict a significant rise in operating profit, largely driven from higher memory chip prices and increased demand for many different kinds of semiconductors that Samsung is producing. Due to this positive signal, Samsung stock price rose over 3% today. And in the second half of this year, overall, Korean corporations on average will have better performance along with slow Korean economic recovery and global economic recovery too. So I am pretty much positive on that Kospi goes up upper 2,800 level by the end of this year.
And Trin, we want to get your global stock market forecast for the next 6 months. Would the bullish trend led by big techs continue into the second half?
Right. So if you look at very similar to South Korea, we have higher rates, right? Central banks are have hiked rates, and they also try to do QT, so which is to tighten liquidity via reducing the balance sheets. But at the same time, stocks continue to grind higher, right? So what we are seeing here is that the global economy for export-oriented countries, they're benefiting from the rise of the ICT cycle, the rise of AI, and so on and so forth, and that's reflected in the U.S. Concentration performance in tech. So when you look at that and even relaying it to the U.S., there's pockets of weakness, right? Some consumers are feeling the pain of higher rates, but larger companies are absorbing much better, right? Smaller firms are absorbing it not as well. Now, the question is, when are we going to see the pain of the smaller guys reflecting in the overall economy, which will lead to rate cuts and so on and so forth? The same is also happening in South Korea, where the ICT sector upturn and also companies like Samsung Electronics, there's anticipation that they're not only benefiting from the upturn of the cycle due to low inventories this and higher demand, but also AI trends like being able to sell more memory chips to NVIDIA, for example, right? But the average Koreans are facing, particularly certain sectors, facing the fallout of higher interest rates, right? So we have these two factors colliding, and that's why you see a divergence in performance, even if the headline number remains quite resilient. We think that over time, you're going to see more cracks in the market. And so as a result, there's still some room for this to run. But we certainly will see a softening of the global economy in the second half, given the fact that the U.S., we expect deceleration of the factors I mentioned to percolate much more. And in Europe, political risk are rising, and so is the U.S. as well. And as a result, this uncertainty means that while you can still have some upside to equities, I do think that there's also higher risk in the second half as you start to see, and the question we ask here is whether or not we're going to have the soft landing that we want, which is what the Goldilocks scenario is like, that towards the end of the second half, we are going to both have rate cuts, but also still have resilient enough global growth to allow us to have a bullish earnings outlook. Now, I think that that's the baseline scenario, and the risk to not having that is quite high.
And that leads us to our next question, Professor Kim. Despite the stock market's seemingly upward trajectory, risks remain, as Trin pointed out, and one of them is, of course, the U.S. presidential election. But what other events or variables could increase market volatility throughout the second half of this year? And what preparatory measures should South Korea consider?
Every country is saying that the largest risk of this year would be U.S. Presidential election, which is an uncontrollable shock to Korean economy. If President Biden is reelected, there won't be much changes or shocks from United States to Korea. But if Mr. Trump is elected, it could bring significant uncertainties and challenges to Korean economy, particularly in terms of the trading. Mr. Trump will try to reshuffle Korean-U.S. free trade agreement by raising tariffs on all imports from Korea. Also, this uncertainty from United States presidential election in November will limit Korean companies' investment, and it gives a negative impact on Korean economic recovery. So Korean government should prepare all different possible scenarios between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump.
And before we let you go, Dr. Kim, the South Korean government also unveiled a new roadmap to boost the country's trade and economic diplomacy. It aims to build the world's most extensive network of free trade agreements by 2027, among other ambitious goals. What are your prospects for the new initiatives?
The ultimate goal of the K-Finance package is to position Korean economy as a central hub in global trading network. As of now, South Korea is sixth largest trading country in the whole world. So K-Finance is a combined policy package that includes expansion of FTA with new trading partners, strengthening existing free trade agreements, economic and financial reforms to support these trade initiatives. It also includes technological and digital integration and support for small and medium-sized companies. I think it is very important attempt to broaden Korea's economic territory in foreign countries because Korea is simply one of the most foreign-dependent economies. So expanding free trade agreements with trading partners are very important infrastructure for boosting trading.
Well, South Korea has signed FTA with nearly 60 countries, so the goal of establishing the world's biggest FTA network doesn't seem that far-fetched. We'll monitor developments closely and with optimism. Thank you, as always, Professor Kim, for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you very much.
And many thanks to you as well, Trin, as always, for your excellent analysis.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?